Guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to repot my largest Phalaenopsis orchid. This is my Aldi's Bear King. I repotted it with you guys 3 years ago, and before that I repotted it when I got it. So I've had it for 5 years. I've had it since it was a seedling. So you guys are in for a treat. You're going to see the before and after on this one. From when it was a seedling from Humid Orchids. Well, it wasn't a seedling, but it wasn't this. It was a lot smaller, it had fewer roots. This is one of my more popular videos on the channel, the before and the after is quite insane because I had to put it in a really big pot. I'm gonna repot it right back into this pot, but as you can see, it kind of leans over. So I don't know what to do. I gotta do something. It's got flowers, but also it has a lot of roots coming out. Today I'm making a big push to repot lots of orchids in the collection, so I'm gonna get it all done. Well, I'm gonna try to do 20 repots today. It's a Sunday morning, it's beautiful out. I'm gonna try to get everything done nice and early so I can enjoy the day. And this is the first one, so I will walk you through it, and I'm gonna show you footage from before and after so you can get a sense of how these orchids grow. And you know, if you're into orchid collecting, you gotta get ready for these orchids to get huge on you. So I hope you guys enjoy the repot, and we'll get started. So let me show you this orchid when I first got it. I got it from Humid Orchids almost 5 years ago, and it came in sphagnum moss. It came in like one of those tight little plugs. It hadn't bloomed at that point, but it had a flower spike that was dormant and just sat there for a while. It actually took maybe about 1.5 years to bloom. This is the flower after it bloomed for the very first time, but I ended up repotting it right back into sphagnum moss, and it ended up doing really well. So let me show you what I did, and I'm going to show you the outcome after repotting it into fluffy sphagnum moss. So whenever you're repotting an orchid, whenever it's in one of these tight plugs, I just find that the orchids either it retains too much water, or it's so tightly packed down that it doesn't absorb the moisture. So I don't like this setup. A lot of nurseries do this because it helps retain water for a long time if these are in shipment or something like that. So I end up repotting these pretty quickly. I took off this very tight sphagnum moss, and I freed the root system. It was a healthy root system, a good looking orchid. And I got rid of that old moss. I cleaned off the roots. There were hardly any dead roots at all. It all was in really good shape here. And then I put it into a 5-inch pot. I put little wicks at the bottom. At the time, I was doing a little bit of self-watering in the summer where I would add like 1 inch of water at the bottom. But I don't do that anymore. But I took very, very fluffy sphagnum moss. I wet it, I fluffed it out, and I made sure it was nice and airy in there. And then I plopped my orchid into the pot, and I was very careful with this repot. You'll see this is a style of repotting that I got from Miss Orchid Girl a couple of years ago, and I've had a lot of success with it. So a lot of folks, they don't like to use sphagnum moss if they have very humid environments because they say it rots their orchids. So what works for me may not work for you. I have very dry winters here, but very hot and humid summers. But the pots tend to dry fast. With that said, if you're growing in a much bigger pot, you're going to want to add some amendments, because then I find that sphagnum moss becomes a little bit more problematic. But with this setup, I had a lot of success. You're going to see the next repot coming back shortly, but you'll see that I kept things nice and airy. It gave plenty of air to the roots. It didn't suffocate those roots, and it created a really nice environment for this orchid to grow, for this orchid to thrive and do really well. Now let's fast forward 1.5 years later, or about 3 years ago when I repotted this orchid after that repot. So it barely fit in the pot anymore. It started growing a couple more leaves. At this point, it started blooming. Ironically, not from that original spike, but it pushed out new spikes. That original spike never bloomed anything. So let me show you the root system on this one. It started growing roots all the way through the bottom. It was a very, very difficult repot for me. I was very gentle with it. This took me about 2 hours to repot. If you guys want to see the full video, I have it linked. but I ended up cutting out the pot. Getting through the bottom was very difficult for me. I just felt like it was a bunch of green beans growing out of this pot. This is a very vigorous hybrid. The flowers are amazing, as I said. They smell like oranges, very strong fragrance, and I had to be really careful with this one. Nowadays, I probably just rip roots out. Over time, you kind of lose patience with some of these repots, but this, I was very careful with it, and then I just realized that sphagnum moss really works well for me. Again, this was a 5-inch pot, but once I took the roots out of the pot, I realized that there was a big root ball in there and I had to put it into something bigger. So it was a lot of trial and error with different pots to see what would work well. And I ended up putting it in that much larger pot. So I took out the sphagnum moss in here. I inspected the roots. There were barely any dead roots. I cleaned it out. I tried to see if there was anything dead in there. There was barely anything dead, and it's because it was nice and fluffy in there. But I'm also unraveling the roots a bit. That way they're not as tightly packed. That way there's more air and that sort of thing. So I settled on this much larger pot. And what I ended up doing is I put sphagnum moss on the bottom. But because this is such a larger pot, this is a 7-inch pot if I'm not mistaken, I ended up adding coconut husk. And the reason why I added coconut husk is that I wanted to add more aeration. So the problem with sphagnum moss is it's amazing if it can dry out quickly, but it could be very difficult if it stays wet for a prolonged period of time. So I knew that even if I packed it in very fluffy, like I did last time, a 7-inch pot would take much longer to dry. So I mixed in about 50-50 sphagnum moss and coconut husk mix with some perlite in here, and it ended up working out beautifully. I also added some slow release fertilizer in here. This is an orchid that needs lots of fertilizer. It grows really well. It's very hungry, and I mean, it paid off. I ended up also fertilizing on top of that, so it was getting fed very well. And I kept it in this pot for 3 years. Again, I kept things fluffy, but with that coconut husk amendment, and it just started blooming like crazy. It even started leaning over. It couldn't even stand up on its own at one point. So I needed to get it out of this pot. But this was the final outcome to this repot. I was happy with it. It was a difficult repot just because it's so vigorous, but it did very well from here. Now let me show you what it looks like 3 years later. It definitely grew well. It started growing sideways, started leaning over. So now it is time to repot once again. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to water this orchid very thoroughly. We want the roots to get loosened up. We want everything to be pliable. So I'm giving it a thorough drench. And then we're going to let it dry for a little bit. I got my materials out since I'm going to repot a ton of stuff today. This is my bark. I got this stuff last year. I got to get some more soon. And this is my moss that I have in bulk. I got it from Sunset Valley Orchids. Good price. I think it was like $140 for a 3-kilogram bale. That lasts forever. I got that actually 2 years ago. And then this, I don't remember, but I'm going to get everything together now. And I'm going to put it into smaller containers. Okay, I'm going to use a paper bag here just to catch everything. And let's see. Oh, this is so top heavy. We're going to get rid of everything, and we're going to lose these roots at the bottom. There's no other way. This pot is just too thick. So I sterilized this, and we're just going to cut that off. There's no way that this pot is going to give. It's a very thick pot, so it's a sacrifice, but it's okay. It's necessary. So let's get this out. Oh, I repotted this, as I said, in 2022 in the spring. Oh, and look at that root system. It's wonderful. Okay. Oh, yeah. This is a very vigorous orchid. I highly recommend it to anyone who's interested. This is called the LD's Bear King RH3. Highly fragrant. Such a good one. My God, look at this. This is wild. So I potted it up in coconut husk and sphagnum moss 3 years ago. And it does have flowers right now, but I want to repot it because once it starts blooming, it doesn't stop. So unless I repotted it in the winter, that's the only time it's not really in bloom. So, my gosh, this is crazy to me. This orchid is so vigorous. I'm going to take off my ring and I'm going to come right back. You know, my friend told me that she repots her plants anytime she gets a Chewy delivery, and she uses her Chewy box and does all of the repotting there. She doesn't have orchids, but she has like regular house plants, so she puts all of any like dirt in there, and that's a good idea. I need to do that. It's a little tip she shared with me that I may adopt. So we're gonna free this up. You see, I was pretty fluffy in there. Like I never got it too packed down, and that's the goal, especially if you're using a big pot. Well, that root is lodged in there, so I'm gonna leave that. We're gonna do our best here. Do we have any dead roots? I feel like maybe a few. I just want to free everything up, but I don't want to disturb anything either. Always a hard thing to do. We're gonna fast forward here. My gosh, this looks so good. Okay, I'm gonna rinse this out and we're gonna come back and trim off some of the dead roots here, but this is such a good root system. Okay, we rinsed everything out, and now what we're gonna do is get rid of any dead roots. This, for 3 years in this pot, this isn't bad at all. Let's see. Anything that's squishy like that is out. Anything like this, anything, if it looks like a green bean, it's a good root. If it's kind of flaccid like that, if it looks like this, you trim it off. If it's firm, it's fine. Like this one is like dead here but alive here, so I'm gonna leave it. If it dies later on, that's fine. This is done. I'm not gonna force anything off. I'm gonna leave it on if it's stuck to a healthy root. Man, what a root system. My God. This orchid, I highly recommend it to anybody who wants something fragrant and vigorous. But with that said, this gets really big. Really, really, really big. Oops. I trimmed off some healthy roots by mistake. This is still alive, but hanging by a thread. We'll leave it. I'm more conservative than I was before. I eventually want to get these roots down into the pot, but we'll see. They're high up. This stem is going to get wild in a couple of years. This isn't bad. Like, these are mostly alive. And again, it's because I potted it up so fluffy. So we're going to repeat that same thing, except we're going to put it in bark and moss. But I think I'm going to leave what I have here. Maybe I'll trim this part off, and then we'll get it into a bigger pot. But geez, what an orchid. All right, we're gonna get it into this pot. I'm gonna put a little moss here. I'm gonna use the same exact pot. I just rinsed it out. And again, we keep it fluffy. I like putting moss at the bottom because it absorbs any extra water in the water reservoir. And then I'm gonna put a little moss right over it. And then we're gonna take this massive plant. Look at that root system. Oh my gosh. We're gonna plop it in. Oh my God. I don't even know anymore what to do. It barely fits. Let's see what I'm gonna do here. Let's see, maybe I will wrap the roots around a bit. I don't even know. Yeah, I don't want to use a bigger pot. The bigger pot you use, the wetter it's going to stay and the harder it is to deal with later on. Let's see. Gosh, this is a lot of roots to deal with. This is a big orchid, but I'm going to try to take advantage and straighten it out as I'm putting it in here so it doesn't lean. So you see how before it was leaning? It's still going to lean a bit, but I'm going to try to make it upright a bit more. And we got some of those roots that were hanging out. I'm going to make sure they go in if I can, just like that. This won't be a perfect repot. I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect repot, I think, when an orchid is this big, because it becomes hard to deal with. But we're going to do our best. And possibly I could put a support stake behind it so that it grows up instead of leaning that way. A support stake back here so that it grows up instead of continues to lean. Yeah, I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to put a support stake right here on this side to prevent it from continuing to lean. You get what I'm saying? So I want to straighten it, so I'll put it here so it has something to anchor to. All right, here we go. I'm going to put it in here before I pot anything up, and it should hold. Yeah, there we go. Now I'm going to fill this up with some moss and bark, mostly bark because it's a bigger pot. And we're going to keep it nice and loose. Man, this is such a big one. All right, let's go. Okay, we're going to sandwich the moss and the bark. We're just going to do our best. This is really hard to show you because of the sheer size of this orchid. I'm going to do my best. I'm trying to fill the gaps in, but not press down hard, if that makes sense. Like I put it in and then I use my finger and I kind of like loosen it as I'm putting it in. I think I'm going to do most of it through the back here, since that's the gap, and then I'll get it to the front. So we want it to be firm in there, but not too packed down. The trick with bigger orchids is you can't have them stay wet for too long. So the bigger the pot, the more wet it stays. It stays wet longer, and that increases your chances that it's going to rot. We don't want that. Okay. We got more in there. So you can water bigger orchids less often because they'll dry less. And when they're in plastic like this, it's a little bit more forgiving because it'll trap the moisture in longer. Let's see if we can get this root in there. Probably not. Oh, probably not. The tougher, not a tough repot, just a little bit more. It's got just so many roots. I'm gonna fill the gaps in and come in and show you when it's done. I know this one is challenging to show you because it's just so big. I don't know if you could, I mean, it's enormous. All right, now that was a repot and a half. I think we solved the leaning issue. I ended up putting 2 support stakes here, but this is what it looks like now. It could sit up, it doesn't lean. It's not the best presentation because it just grows like sideways, but I'm gonna see if I could train it to grow up. I'm gonna do my best with these support stakes, and I angled the plant so that it doesn't fall. With that said, these blooms are so gorgeous. I like growing this on my windowsills, so I'll probably put it back there. As for the care after you repot something like this, don't fertilize it for like a month, I would say. Let it recover. It's already blooming, so I mean, maybe it's a little setback. I tried to be as gentle as possible, but when you're dealing with like bark, it can pierce some of the healthy roots, but this is it. I did my best, guys. Let me know what you think down below, but this orchid has come a long way. It's huge, huge, huge. One of my biggest Phals. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.